Good morning, and welcome to the Mental Breakdown. I'm Dr. Berney Wilkinson.
I'm Dr. Richard Marshall.
And on today's show, we're going to talk about how do you make your kids do something that they just don't want to do. Good morning, Richard. How are you doing today?
It's Friday.
It is Friday.
In some people's world. No, it's Friday. Had another week. Again, they're flying by.
They are.
They seem to accelerate this time of year. The last quarter of the year, every year seems to go by
It
quickly.
does.
So much to do. So much
There's
going
so
on.
much. Yeah, there's so many things planned that
Right.
you're just looking forward to the thing that's planned, and that just makes time fly.
Right.
So, but today's show, we're going to expand a little bit on on one of the morning show topics from Wednesday morning when we got a letter from a listener talking about that one was about his son who wasn't doing his homework. He couldn't get his son to do his homework.
And it was signed Frustrated
Father.
And we understand.
Yes.
We understand the frustration. So.
I asked, well, if you remember, I asked you if you wrote that. So
I could have.
But we're going to expand on it a little bit because, while there are times, of course, when our kids refuse to do things, but they're very specific things. And that's what we talked about on Wednesday. Today we're going to expand it a little bit and talk about what happens when your child is just refusing to do most things that you're asking them to do.
Right.
Because that is a very different set of circumstances. It's a very different situation that you're in.
Yeah, that's right. If you have a child who's just not doing one thing, it's probably...
You can address that thing.
Address that single thing. There's a number of ways to do that. We're talking about kids who are, I think parents would say, not motivated or lazy. Okay,
Right.
They would say, well, he's lazy. He doesn't want to do anything. Mel Levine wrote a book called The Myth of Laziness.
Right.
And in the book he says kids are not lazy. They just don't do what we want them to do.
Right.
Okay. Big difference.
Right.
It's not that they're not motivated. They're just not motivated to do what we want them to do.
Right.
So in this case, it's not a specific behavior that the child is refusing to do. It's a more generalized problem.
Right.
We can't get this kid to do anything that we want him to
Right.
do.
Yeah. So that's the approach that we're going to take today, because that does happen. We have a handful of patients between the two of us where that really is a major issue. The parents just can't get the kids to do anything. And so let's begin by talking about that, because I think that a lot of people who don't live in that home will say, what do you mean you can't make him take a shower? What do you mean? What do you mean you can't make him go to school? What do you mean you can't make him do his homework?
Before I became a parent, I used to ask that question.
Yeah.
I said, what do you mean he won't do it?
Yeah. And you think, well, of course the kid's going to do that because you're telling him to do that, and because if he doesn't,
then
whoa,
long pause.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the implications of corporal punishment and all that kind of stuff. But again, the reality is that there are many kids who corporal punishment doesn't work, consequences don't work, and you just can't make them do something. And
say that again.
We're gonna be very honest about that. I think you can't make somebody do something.
If
you can make their life uncomfortable,
right.
should they choose not to do it.
You can make them sorry for not doing it.
Right. But you can't make them do something.
Right.
I know people personally and therapeutically that you can make their life as uncomfortable as you can imagine, and that kid will dig their heels in and they'll say, no.
Still may not do it.
Not going to do it. Mm-hmm. You can't make their hand move and do their homework.
That's right. You can't make anybody get an A.
Right.
You can make them sorry for not getting an A, but you can't make them get an A.
Right.
That is the child's decision.
So I think we have to begin with that perspective.
Right.
Because if you begin this whole thing from the perspective that, oh no, I can make him do it, you will find that that battle of wills, and again, it's going to depend on your child. Some kids will Some kids will respond to typical parenting strategies, and they will begin to comply. But there is a subgroup of children who will not.
No, that's right. No matter what you do.
No matter what you do, and for whatever reason, and those kids oftentimes have mental health issues.
Right.
A lot of times it's anxiety. You know what? And I'm not going to entertain the idea of oppositional defiant disorder or conduct disorder. Right. Those are uninformative.
Different. Right.
That those diagnoses and the idea of those conditions don't really, they just don't really make sense. Well, to me in general, but that's not. We're not going to talk about that way, because if a kid is refusing to do all these things, they would meet criteria for that. So whatever the reason, so we're not going to talk about those diagnoses. But if a kid has anxiety disorders and depression or lots of other things, bipolar disorder or whatever, they're going to have that. They're going to be at risk for refusing and just not being able to and not willing to comply.
Right.
So we have that aspect of this, and so when you have a child who is adamantly refusing to do anything that you want them to do, that usually means that they will be fine doing things as long as they want to do it. As long as they want to play video games, as long as they want to do this or go there, it's going to be fine. But as soon as they're put in a position where they're asked to do something that they don't want to do,
then you're going to get pushed back.
They don't.
Right.
They push back. So,
and because all kids do what they want, will do what they want to do.
Right.
Lie around on the bed, stay on their cell phones, play video games.
Right.
Go out and play basketball all day. They're going to do what they want to do.
Right.
What's happening is they're not doing what we want them to do.
Right.
Okay.
Now, there's a number of strategies that we use to deal with these kinds of issues. The first group is the behavioral strategies.
Right.
And so we have something that we call the Premack principle, or is sort of grandma's law, right?
Grandma's law.
So if you eat your vegetables, you get dessert.
That's
so if you do something, you pair something that the child doesn't really want to do with something that they really want, and then you hope that the interest in doing what they want to do will get them through it. So if you get all of your homework done, then you can play video games.
That's right. Yeah, do your responsibility first.
Right.
Then you have free time to do all the other activities that you want to do.
Right.
But you have to take care of your responsibilities first. If you, in your home, if you're getting into the pattern of kids are doing what they want, and then if there's time, they do homework, you have to stop that and try. Or they go out and play, and then they come in and do their chores. No. Take care of their responsibilities first, then they're free to do what they want to do.
Right. So that we call that the Premack principle, and I think a lot of parents use that already, but it's a very common strategy. Again, for some kids it just doesn't work.
Right.
The idea of we're going to get to this, but I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there now. A lot of this stuff depends on how important the consequence or the reward or the thing that they would typically want to do, how important that is to them at that particular time.
Right.
If you say, if you eat all your vegetables, you can have dessert. Well, what do we have for dessert? Well, dessert is
oatmeal raisin cookies.
And they're like, I don't like oatmeal raisin cookies. Right. So what is their motivation then to eat their vegetables? Similarly, if you say, well, after you do your homework, then you can play video games, and they say, I don't really want to play video games today.
About video games.
So what is their motivation then? So the Premack principle is really good for situations when that preferred activity is in fact preferred at that time.
Right.
So it's really going to be dependent on that, and that creates a problem for us sometimes, because then you have to sort of be on your toes and shift.
Right.
And some parents, sometimes we just can't do that. And I know I've met a lot of families and parents who say, I just can't find anything that he's really interested in doing. I can't really find anything that's important enough to him to change this behavior. Right. And that's a challenge. That's a really tough situation.
That's right. But again, that's a little bit different situation.
Right.
We're talking about the average kid who usually will respond to this.
Right.
The Premack principle.
Right.
It's been around for a long time. As you say, it's known as grandma's rule.
Right.
Or my mother's rule. Do this and then you get this. Do something that you need to do, and you can do something you want to do. You can go out and play after you do this. I grew up with a kid, and if you wanted to stay at his house, like if you slept over his house on a weekend, you knew that on Saturday morning you were going to help his mother clean the house, because she cleaned the house every Saturday morning and her sons had to help. And if you stayed overnight, you were part of the help, or you weren't welcome to stay there.
Spend the night Saturday night.
That's right. Wait till Saturday, right?
Yeah.
But that was the rule in their house, and you knew that if you're going there first, you did this, then you go out and play the rest of the day.
Now, another behavioral approach is again a very classic traditional one that we know about, and that's reward and punish. So if you do your homework, I will give you this, or if you if you don't do your homework, I'm going to do this.
That's
so
right.
We're looking at the idea of using rewards and punishment. We have talked about rewards and punish a lot on this podcast, because for similar reasons, they're very limited in efficacy. They don't generalize very well. They're really only good for as much as the parent who provides the reward or the punish is present. And so, if mom is the one who gives the reward for doing homework, well, as soon as mom's not home, well, now what are you going to give me for doing my homework? That's the traditional, well, you just wait till your father gets home. It's the idea that, okay, dad is the one that punishes, so when dad's not around, there's no reason to behave.
I can do whatever I want.
Right. So
I only have to behave when dad's around.
Right. So reward and punish, again, works well for some kids. Some kids, respond beautifully to that. But other kids don't.
Right. Especially if it's something they really don't want to do.
Right. Now, a final one sort of in this behavioral category is something that we call response cost.
Right. And that's another one that's frequently used.
Right. And so this is where it's almost like, well, in schools we call it a token economy, right? So you earn things.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, you can earn things, or you have to pay things for what you want. So maybe a simple example of this is, if you do your homework every day, you get a sticker, and then at the end of the week, if you have 4 stickers, then you get this.
Right.
So it's sort of like you can earn credits, and then you can trade in those credits for something that you want to do.
Although I think most parents use it in just the reverse way. If you don't do this, this is what it's going to cost you.
Right.
If you don't do this, then some aversive consequence is going to appear in your life.
Yeah.
So usually parents turn it around and say, it couldn't work either way.
Yeah, and I guess that's response cost versus token economy.
Right.
So it's sort of reward punish. It's sort of the same back and forth.
Right.
So
those are the behavioral approaches. But what they rely on is either to reward or punish, and it's always external. It's extrinsic to the child. It's outside the child.
Right.
What we're doing is we're imposing our will on the child, and if the child doesn't do what we want, then the child's going to pay some price for that.
Right.
So but that's one way of approaching it, and as you say, it may work with 60 or 70 or 80% of children.
Right.
It might be perfectly effective.
Right.
They might not like it, but it'll work.
Yeah. Now, another broad category is what we would call the cognitive model. And this is where, one thing that you do is you sit down with your kid and you talk about goals. What do you want to accomplish? You have to pass 6th grade, you have to do your homework.
Right.
All right. So do you want to pass 6th grade?
That's right. You start with whenever you have a cognitive theory, it's how does my child think about things? What is my child's thinking? I'm not just interested in their behavior, getting the assignment done. I'm more interested in how are they thinking about it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to pass, you have to do these things. I don't see any other option, honey. I just, what should I do? What should we do?
And believe us when we say that, a student is not thinking about being promoted on the first day of school. That's not a thought. 180 school days from now, I need to make sure that I have a high enough GPA that I'm going to be able to go to the next grade. Kids don't think that. Most ninth graders are not thinking about what it's going to be like when they finish high school.
Right.
So they're not, a lot of kids have a rough ninth grade year,
Right.
and it's simply because they're just not mature enough, and all the other transitions get in the way of them really being able to think, I need to make sure that I do pretty good this year, because if I dig a hole this year
Right.
too deep,
No.
it's going to be really tough for me to accomplish other goals when I graduate.
Right. Kids enter high school and they're so overwhelmed just with making the adjustment,
Right.
Socially, academically, athletically, just adjusting to such an enormous
Environmentally,
adjustment.
the
sheer
grand
size
scale
of it.
of the high schools, right?
And so so all of our energy is going into how do I navigate this huge system, and you're not thinking about, well, wait a minute, 4 years from now I have to do my college applications.
Right.
So that gets lost sometime in that freshman year.
Yeah. So you want to sit down with your kid and talk about goals and
Right.
what they help them understand that how their actions now will result in the goals that they have in the future.
That's right. Instead
it's
of
very cognitive.
Now you're not thinking about punishing them for what they're not doing,
Mm-hmm.
but you're trying to get their thinking straightened out so that they say, oh, that's right, I do have this goal.
Mm-hmm.
I need to rethink how I'm doing the ninth grade.
Right.
Because we've changed their thinking,
Right.
not affected, not directly acted on their behavior.
Right. Now another approach to this that is similar is the idea of talking to them about their own expectations and what they value themselves.
That's right.
Some kids simply do not value homework. They see homework as busy work, and some kids just don't tolerate busy work very well. And so you have to sit down and talk with them and help shift some of those values and some of those perspectives, because depending on the school you go to, homework is a major portion of your grade. And so you can go in there and you can make A's on all of your tests, but if you don't do your homework, you're going to get a B and sometimes even a C as your final grade. And so you need to help them shift that perspective.
That's right. And you need to remember that your children have in their head have something called expectancy/value.
Right.
They have this little calculus that they're always doing, and they have, first of all, it's expectancy, and that is, do I feel that I can do this work?
Right.
Okay. Do I have the expectation that I'm able to do this work?
Right. So a part of this is the belief in their own ability.
That's right.
Right.
And if they say yes, okay, we have that part. Now there's a second part, and that's the value part.
Right.
Do I value it?
Right.
So you might say, yeah, I can do it, but I don't value it.
Right.
Or no, I can't do it, but I'd really like to be able to. I value being able to do my homework, but I'm unable to do it.
Right.
And so children are doing this calculus all the time. So if they're refusing to do homework, it may be that either the expectancy or the value are sort of out of focus, and you can help them refocus on those two things.
Right. And so we see that, of course, with cleaning your room. Of course, they have the ability to clean their room. There's just no value in it.
They don't see the value.
I know where everything is. It's fine to me. I don't mind stepping over these piles of clothes.
And I know which are clean and which are dirty.
Right. It's fine.
Exactly.
So to them, there's no value in doing that.
Right.
They absolutely have the ability to do it.
Why do I need to have a clean room?
Right.
And they'll ask you that.
Who comes in
now?
there? Nobody
Now
comes
you're
in.
an expectancy value.
Right.
They just don't value it enough to do
Right.
it. So you either have to make it valuable enough by threatening to punish,
Right.
or rewarding them.
Right.
But the cleaning the room isn't a value.
Right.
Avoiding the punishment is a value.
Right.
Getting a reward is a value, but cleaning a room isn't.
And sometimes that, again, is just an explanation. So let me explain to you why you should value this. And this is some reasons why you should clean your room and help them understand. Because again, when we get into that situation, well, you clean it because I said so.
Right.
Well, as soon as you don't say so, they're not going to clean it up anymore. And so you're not really teaching them anything except that there's a consequence if you don't.
That's right.
And as soon as that consequence is removed, there's no reason
You want them to value a clean room,
Right.
not getting paid,
Right.
not avoiding punishment.
Right.
You want them to value cleaning the room. That takes a very different approach
Absolutely.
than reward or punish.
Right.
So,
Now, the third big category of strategies that we use or things that we think about with this is sort of a self-theory.
right.
Right? And so who is this kid? Right. Now, of course, we're not really talking about that as quite as philosophically as it may sound,
Right.
but we got to talk about their self-esteem and their self-efficacy and some of those kinds of attributes about them, because some kids don't value things and they don't put an emphasis on things and they don't do things simply because, well, sadly, they may just not feel like they're worthy, or they may not feel that it's worth their time,
or they may not even know enough about themselves to know what they do value.
Right.
Okay. And so, as adults, we sort of value certain things. If you have children, you value your children.
Right.
You value your house. You value your car. Well, children haven't worked out that value system yet. They're still in the process. And so it might help to work out who they are, what they value. I think there are 3 large areas that come under these self-theories. One, self-efficacy.
Right.
Can I?
Right.
And many children simply have very low self-efficacy. They don't think they're very competent.
Right.
That they can do things. And so make sure you know your child's level of self-efficacy. The second is self-worth. Am I worth it? Right. And the third is self-determination. Right. Am I able to? Do I have the skills and the ability to do those sorts of things? And it may be that a child just hasn't resolved these things about himself or herself, and so she starts to avoid homework, or she starts to avoid schoolwork, or avoid school altogether.
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot that goes into this self-theory aspect, because, but again, you learn that from talking with the child. You don't learn it from punishing them or providing these consequences or anything like that. You learn it by talking with them and asking them questions, and then helping them work through that process.
And this is what we mean when we always say you first of all have to have a relationship with your child. I mean, regardless of which of these approaches you use, whether it's a behavioral approach, a self-approach, or a cognitive approach to motivation, you have to have a relationship with your child so that you can sit down and work these things out.
Right.
Because in all 3 cases, you're really we urge you to work with your child in a collaborative approach.
Right.
Don't just impose.
Right. So these ideas, these theories, these perspectives, most of them work when we're talking about and dealing with typical healthy students, children, and teenagers.
Right.
There are certainly times when we're going to have kids who have mental health issues that interfere with all of this.
That's right.
Again, there are kids who you could go through all of these things perfectly, and it doesn't do anything. It's not going to change anything.
It's not going to matter. There are children who are not going to respond to any of these. It's sad.
Yeah.
It's devastating in a family, but there are times when none of these things are going to work.
Right. And B, so you have those with mental health issues, and then B is you have those who perhaps have some mental health issues, but have also learned that they have learned to work the system because they know either the parents aren't consistent, or the parents aren't going to follow through, or their environment, their system is so either unstable or weak, that there's just not a steady foundation that they know that they can make decisions as they choose.
So you have one group, because there is an underlying mental illness that, they're exploding, or they're just not capable. Then you have the second group who have learned how to manipulate the system. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Is there another?
Well, I think that certainly there is this combination of those, because you have there are absolutely kids with some mental health issues that sort of it begins with that, and then they again quickly learn that this works for me.
Right.
I can get away with this if I say, oh well, I just can't pay attention.
And you and I both had many children who have learned that if I say I'm going to kill myself, they don't get many demands.
Right.
As soon as they push that button,
right.
I think I'm going to hurt myself. All the pressure stops.
Right.
Okay.
And so in these situations, it is so important that parents get help. They get the assistance that they need, whether it's mental health treatment for those kids. If your child is making threats or threatening self-harm or losing control to that point, get acute help, take them to the hospital, take them to, get somebody there to help them in the immediate, so that they remain safe, and they know that as a sense of security or a sense of well, I better not do that again. If you make those kinds of threats, this is what's going to happen. This is how we're going to respond, because we have to take that very serious.
That's right. You don't ever want to say, well, I didn't want to call the police, or I didn't want to get to the hospital because of the embarrassment. I would rather be embarrassed than go to a funeral.
Right, absolutely. So you have to take those things seriously, but you can't just. But that doesn't mean that you just sit back and you say, okay, you don't have to do your homework tonight. Well, maybe we'll do it in the morning.
No, it doesn't mean you give in. And parents will ask that. Well, don't I have to do? Yes, you have to have the expectation. But in these more severe cases, I hate to use the word severe,
extreme.
But in these extreme cases, don't worry about winning the battle.
Right.
Okay, there's a larger war that you have to fight, and you're probably going to need some reinforcements and some help in fighting that larger war. Yeah. Don't worry about a single homework assignment. Don't worry about a single day of school attendance. There are larger issues that you need to deal with. So make sure you get help. Make sure you deal with those larger issues.
Yeah. When I worked at the hospital and kids would be Baker acted, that's what they do here in Florida, is if a kid is a danger to themselves or others, we call it the Baker Act here. Right. And what we would have parents do is bring their schoolwork. Right. While they're here, they can sit in here and do their schoolwork. We can help them if we can, but yeah, you don't. This isn't a vacation. This isn't a way to get out of your obligations. Right. Make sure that you're still doing
obligations, the expectations are still there.
Right. So when we're the last piece I think that we need to talk about is that you have those kids that none of these strategies are going to work. None of these approaches are going to be effective. They may have an underlying mental health condition, but they're just refusing. At that point, sometimes you need sort of an additional level of intervention. Sometimes you need a more intensive approach. Sometimes that means programs that the kids may have to go to, because oftentimes in these situations that means that the kid's living in a home where really the kid is in control. The kid is in control of the house, and that's not good for the kid or the parent.
If a child has gained control of a house, you do need to get some professional help, because that's not going, it's not ever going to get better. You're going to enter those teenage years, and this is going to get much, much worse.
Yeah, that's one of the challenges. I know that Dr. Richard and I, we've talked about a lot of times over the years. That's some of the problems that we have with outpatient treatment. We both have a history of working in hospitals and in inpatient units, and the challenge with outpatient is you can have a person come once a week for an hour each session, and that's pretty frequently.
That's right.
By typical terms. Right. But there's still 167 hours in a week that the kid does whatever the kid does, and the parent then has to be dealing with that, and so it's extremely difficult working on an outpatient basis, helping some of these issues, because you just really need that intensity of we need to be working on this for hours a day.
That's right. You need to have a captive audience. You need to have control of the environment. This is very, very difficult to do.
Right. At home. And that's why some of those wilderness programs, for example, some of them you want to avoid, but some of them are very good, because what they do is they're immediate consequences. You have very clear, concrete expectations, and if you don't meet those, this will happen. And in those good programs, there's no excuses. There's no well, maybe we'll do it tomorrow. No. If you don't do it, this is what's going to happen.
They're structured that way. And typically we can't structure homes that way. Because different people are there.
Real life is too variable.
In
those programs, they have control of everything.
That's right. They control the environment 24 hours a day. We don't do that in our homes. Too many variables, too many people doing too many different things, different family members. What if a sibling has a piano recital that night? Changes the whole dynamic.
Changes everything.
You don't have that in these self-contained programs.
Yeah. So it's not a step that most parents want to take.
Right.
I've certainly worked with families who have made those choices with positive gains.
Right.
Certainly had some that it just really didn't do much.
Didn't work. Right.
And a lot of times that's that depends on the kid, the program, and also what happens when the kid returns. That's another big issue. So, I just thought we needed to mention that part because there are going to be those parents, hopefully, who are listening to this who are saying, I've tried this, I tried that, and none of this stuff is working.
Right.
I'm getting mental health treatment and it's not working. What is the next step? And the next step is sometimes the more intensive, and oftentimes will include some mental health support for the parent, because it's very draining, it's very trying, and very difficult for the parent to cope with that stuff. Right. So,
but if you get, and there's two more things that I'd like to add. If you get to this point where you feel like your child, that you can't impose these responsibilities, whether it's homework, chores, cleaning rooms, if your child rejects all that and is just saying, no, I'm just going to do what I want to do, there are 3 approaches that you can try. If they don't work, then you may want to seek professional assistance and say, I've tried these 3 things. Right. This is how it worked out. And so what are my other options? What else can I do? Because I think the first thing you have to do is, I think it's safe to assume that most children are just seeking control and they'll do okay. But I think you have to ask the next question: am I dealing with something underneath this? Am I dealing with a larger issue, a more important issue, like a mental health problem that requires a very different approach?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, you really have to consider those things.
Right. And then the third thing is, with older children, teenagers and beyond, parents have the right to set up boundaries. I think this is especially true for kids over the age of 18. Through high school, you kind of have to weather the storms, and because our obligation is to get our children to complete high school, and we are responsible for them to the age of 18. Okay, we do have this parental responsibility. At the same time, we do have the right to protect ourselves emotionally. Right. As I'm thinking of emotional protection now, so that, let's say you have an older child who just doesn't feel like working. Okay, you don't have the obligation to continue supporting that child financially. You don't have to throw the child out into the street. You don't want to make them homeless, but you have the right to set up some boundaries and say, I'm not going to pay for a cell phone. Right. I'm not going to pay for your entertainment. I'm not going to pay for your internet service. If you want to live in the house, that's fine, but I'm not going to pay for all these other things. Right. Okay. The trap we need to avoid is supporting our children after high school graduation. The trap we need to avoid is supporting our children enough so that they feel that they really don't have to do anything. Some children are very happy living in poverty if they can do what they want to do. Right. And we need to be careful that we don't set up a situation where our children are living in poverty. They're not really, because they're coming home to a nice, secure house and lots of food and refrigerators and all that stuff. So they're really not homeless. They're not in poverty, but they're quite happy with their circumstances. Right. They have lower expectations, and this is okay. They'll accept this. Yeah. But you have to protect yourself. If you're a nervous wreck because your child is in the house at age 21 or 22, there are ways to get kids out of the house. Gentle ways. You don't have to throw them out. We don't advocate that. But there are ways to protect yourself and to get your children on a different path. Right. But again, it may require professional assistance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Those are good points. So, all right. Well,
Friday.
That's it for today. Okay. Let us know if you have any perspectives, any experiences that may be similar or different than what we're talking about. And we'd love to hear from you guys. We'd also love it if you wrote a comment or a review on iTunes. If you subscribe to our YouTube channel, that would be cool if you did that. Yeah. And again, stay in touch with us. Write to us. We're always looking for ways to talk to you about what it is that you're interested in.
I would really love to hear from anybody who is struggling with this issue of they just can't get their kids, at whatever age, get their kids go to school, do their homework, do their chores, get a job, whatever it is. Let us know what your experiences are, and maybe together we can learn how to solve these problems better.
Absolutely. So, all right. So that's it for this week. We will be back next week to talk more about other things. Who knows what those other things may be?
And don't forget about Sunday night. In one of our podcasts, we mentioned use Sunday night
as a way to set a goal.
To set a goal, for something you want to do.
Right.
I would feel a lot better if, finish the sentence, and set that up for next week.
I would feel a lot better if my son would do his homework.
Ooh,
that would be a tough one.
Wow.
All right.
Take on something easy. Get the low-hanging fruit.
Something
first.
You have a little more control
Clean a
over.
Closet, or clean out the trunk of your car. Rearrange your garage.
All right. So we will see you next week for another episode. And until then, I'm Dr. Berney.
I'm Dr. Richard.
Stay happy and healthy, and forget to be afraid.